we're going to talk about that in a little bit more, and I want you to keep those ideas in your head. So there's some different connotations of turn the other cheek when it's applied on a bigger basis, and you start to think about some of the other things that are going on. And so let's think about those ideas as we go through our PowerPoint. So you can think of a conflict in general terms as a perceived incompatibility of actions or goals. So the conflict, again, is perceived as we're just incompatible. We just don't have, our two ideas aren't going to meet. And you see that a lot in our society right now. And then peace is marked by a condition where there's low levels of hostility and aggression, and by mutually beneficial relationships. And so you don't see, it seems like increasingly, at least from my vantage point, maybe other people don't share this view, but it seems like there are increasing conflicts and increasing competition where there's not necessarily a mutually beneficial relationship, or at least people don't perceive it that way. And we get caught in something that's called a social trap. And this is a situation in which conflicting parties, each rationally pursuing its own self-interest, become caught in mutually destructive behavior. So you can see this social trap illustrated in your text and through a game, where you could have two people and say, you know what, you can have two options. One option, you get $5 and your friend gets $5. Another option, you can gain $10, but your friend your enemy may lose $5. And so what tends to happen is both sides choose, well, I want the $10 and cause them to lose $5, and in the end it's a zero-sum game. Neither party wins. There's also something called the tragedy of the commons, and there's a YouTube video that you can reference to help you understand this, and our text talks about this. But what it's basically referring to is that when people pool together their resources, put things together, that over time people tend to consume more than their fair share, and eventually it causes the collapse of everything, which is the tragedy of the commons. So it's been noted that smaller communities are better able to manage their shared resources, that big communities don't necessarily do a good job of this. I also included some ideas about taxes and where they used to be, because in the United States we used to devote a lot more of our resources, at least percentage-wise, of our shared resources to common goals. There's a big push for privatization, which is, the whole 9 yards goes, the individual competition makes people more stronger than cooperation. And so you can see like the tax rates kind of reflecting that. You saw in 1945, right after the war, the top income tax rate was about 66%, and then it's gradually declined thereafter. And so you see that the people that are in that top level, that highest earning level, with the decline in what they pay into that common good, or at least those common funds, you can see that their income has exponentially increased, whereas the rest of the folks, by and large, the most people have about the same level of income. In fact, the lower tiers have actually, their income has actually decreased because of inflation and different factors, to where their income doesn't buy as much as it used to. And so this is actually in your book on pages 605, 598, and 601. And this is from the chart 1611. And it talks about the actual distribution of wealth. And so what you see here is the top 20% own owns roughly 90% or so of the wealth. You can see that the second 20%, owns about a tenth. The third 20%, maybe a fifth, And then the bottom 40% maybe have maybe 1% of the wealth in the country. This is what people think it is, and this is where people really ideally, if you survey them, would like it to be. Yet our policies don't necessarily follow through with that ideal situation where that would be, yeah, the top 20% can have quite a bit, but the lower 20% should have ample to live on. And so keep those kind of ideas in mind. How to escalate a conflict? You add competition. So Sharif, this is actually from Oklahoma City. This is in your book. Sharif had an experiment, and it would basically turn into a zero-sum game. A distinct outgroup stands as a potential competitor. So if you want to add and escalate conflict, add competition. It will escalate conflict, and also add injustice. Like we talked about, if people aren't getting, what they believe to be a fair share, there's going to be conflict. And so there's a golden rule that says whoever has the gold makes the rules. And those with social power usually convince themselves that others deserve what they get. I had you watch a Monopoly game early in the semester, and I'll probably have you do a reflection on that at some point. But there have been studies that show that the more social power a person gets, the more entitled they are that they deserve that power. And so why is this? Well, we've learned all throughout the semester people have a self-serving bias, and also that leads to our self-serving bias in our groups. Leads to groups accepting credit for good deeds and shirking responsibility for bad deeds. You blame others and discount any good. You also self-justify. People deny the wrong of their evil acts. It's just how people are. This comes back to us from the very beginning. The fundamental attribution error. People see others' hostility. Well, I don't see why they're upset. They just must be evil people. I don't know why they're upset. So that internal disposition, they put they're just mean people and they deserve what they get. One filters the information to meet one's preconceptions. And groups tend to polarize all of these effects. So where they may be inherent in each of us as individuals, when we get in a group, our groupthink tends to escalate these. Groupthink emerges, and one side is moral and strong, and the opposition is evil and weak. And then you have this in-group bias and negative stereotypes of the outgroup, and they often become resistant to change. And even when there's contradictory evidence, people hold on to this belief that the outgroup is evil. And so escalating conflict leads to very simplistic thinking. People stop using their rational brains and retreat to their lower brain, their amygdala, their reptilian brain. When tension arises, as happens during international crises, rational thinking becomes more difficult. That's from Janus in 1989. Remember the fMRI studies, individuals in fight or flight, their amygdala takes over and shuts down decision making. So political rhetoric of leaders prior to military aggression begins to display increasingly simplistic thinking. An us versus them, we are good, they are bad sort of tone, instead of accepting and expressing situational complexity, which meaning, these people are going through hard times. We may need to look at their side. It's very important that goes in times of conflict and pre-conflict. Leaders tend to polarize and demonize the other side. So the dangers of the group environment of conflict, the Tutsis and the Hutus in Rwanda. For those of you that don't know, it was a horrible genocide in Africa, and there's a movie about it called Hotel Rwanda. But if you want to watch a few of these YouTube clips, it gives you some of the dangers of escalating conflicts and some of the things that we just talked about in those slides. And so I'm going to use the other video to finish out this talk.